Do communist economies grow faster than capitalist ones? This is the topic of the presentation here, coming from the research by myself and my colleague Aras Žirgulis, based on evidence from Lithuania since 1937. So Lithuania during the Soviet occupation, which is going to be the main point of this research, did not had any territorial changes, but it experienced 15% population loss since 1940 due to deportations, Nazi crimes, Soviet crimes, and exile. It was also a war-devastated country. It was forcibly collectivized and forcibly industrialized, but by 1970s it had become one of the most productive Soviet republics, above the Union average. Now, our data seems to confirm the general capitalist communist post-war transition pattern, which shows usually that communist states after the Second World War, they grew faster than capitalist ones. And we included Lithuania using the newly acquired data for 1937 into that research, so just before the occupation by Soviet Union, assuming that that Lithuania's economic level did not change from 1937 until occupation in 1940. So here we see from this graph quite significantly that the communist growth average was above capitalist growth average, signified by the dark bars, before 1973. And Lithuania's growth before 1973 was even above the communist average, meaning that it was highly productive. Its productivity was quite significantly increasing during that period. But as with most communist countries, so in Lithuania, after 1973, the growth levels plunged and they became well below the capitalist average. And also the complete collapse of Lithuanian economy in 1990 shows that it was heavily dependent on Soviet common market by that time, which was buying its goods, and these goods were inferior to consumers in the West, so they became incompetitive. The reason why before 1973 growth rates in communist countries were quite high is because central planning allows for rapid reconstruction after such periods as the war, and for the meantime, when the population does not require differentiated goods but require only basic goods for survival, it provides quite good basis for growth. However, in the 1970s, when the world became in demand for differentiated products, not let's say one pair of shoes, but 10 types, 20 types, 30 types of different shoes, the communist central planning system was not able to produce as good results as the capitalist system. So we decided to make also a difference in difference analysis to see whether truly the growth before 1973 was as significant, because part of this significant growth was obviously due to devastation by the war, and the recovery is always more rapid after a greater destruction. So our goal was to isolate the effect of being a communist country from the general trend of economic growth over time. And what we found out is that in absolute terms, the communist bloc grew less in all periods since 1973, meaning that even though the average growth rates were higher than the capitalist ones, the total absolute terms growth in capitalist countries was quite significantly lower, and this is signified by this graph here. We can see that the difference between capitalist and communist economies growth was negative in favor of capitalist countries, even in the period between 1937 to 1973. So what further questions this leads to? Of course, knowing how difficult was the transition from communism back to capitalism in 1990, when most of the Baltic states, let's say, economies plunged into depression, to analyze whether it was the same in 1940 when the reverse process happened, when countries from capitalism switched forcibly, of course, to central planning, or is that depression coming after the change of system only a one-way process? There is still not enough evidence from the countries directly occupied by the Soviet Union, which is the Baltic countries mainly. And also, what's the evidence from, as I said, other Soviet republics, not only Latvia and Estonia, which were occupied in 1940 together with Lithuania, but also from the other republics that became independent in 1990s, but were occupied by Soviet Union already in early 1900s, including Ukraine, Belarus, the Caucasus countries, Georgia, Armenia and Azerbaijan, and also other economies across Asia. So there are a lot of questions to be answered, but for now, thank you for listening and see you next time.